Let's attempt to unpack everything we saw on Sunday Night Football last night.
Let's try.
I think we were all Justin Herbert as the clock wound down at the end of overtime and rooting for a tie. Said no one ever until last night. I, for one, Michael, do not believe that Brandon Staley blew it by calling a timeout with 38 seconds left. Do you blame Brandon Staley? Because I don't.
Okay. Well, you're saying blame Brandon Staley, but you assume that I wanted a tie. I didn't want a tie. I didn't want this disaster scenario. I didn't want this, hey, it's good business for me, it's good business for you. Let's go in together. It's not about you.
Well, it's not about you.
Okay.
The debate
you said,
today
if I blame him,
is that the debate today is that
I wanted the Raiders to win.
It doesn't matter what you wanted. What could have happened is a tie would have put them both in. And the way it looked last night, the way it played out is that had Brandon Staley not called timeout, as you just heard Rich Bisaccia say, the Raiders were talking about whether or not to not kick a long field goal, which could have been blocked, which could have been returned for a touchdown, and knock them out. But once, it was discussed, which clearly I think the takeaway from last night is not everybody got the memo. Because Derek Carr could say, hey, we always want to play for the win all he wants. Rich Bisaccia, the way they were approaching that last possession as clock time was winding down, didn't seem that aggressive when it came to trying to get in position for a field goal until Brandon Staley called timeout. Now, the reason I don't blame Brandon Staley for calling timeout is because he's not omniscient. He's not omnipotent where he can not only knows what the Raiders are going to do, but can control what the Raiders are going to do in those final seconds to say, you know what? Clearly they're playing for a tie. If anything, when he called timeout, maybe he gives Rich Bisaccia that universal nod, like, hey man, what we doing here? Like, like something, get on the same page with him. Because once he called timeout, the Raiders approached it differently according to their head coach, who I believe. Now, the real issue is this. The real issue is that
I hate that stuff.
Josh Jacobs.
I hate this.
The real issue is that Josh Jacobs ripped off a 10-yard run. So whatever was discussed in that timeout, the issue that has haunted the Chargers all year, or one of the issues that has haunted the Chargers all year, is their porous run defense. And giving up a 10-yard run is what's inexcusable in that moment, not calling timeout.
Right.
Or if anything, taking Kenneth Murray off the field was the issue, not calling the timeout. Once they called timeout, once Josh Jacobs got a 10-yard run, the rest is history. But Brandon Staley was trying to play defense in that moment and make sure it was as long a field goal as possible, which is the right thing to do. He had no idea of knowing whether the Raiders were on the fence about a tie.
Yeah, and look, and I'm glad he had no idea about it. And this tells me that there was no pregame conversation or conversation during the week about, hey, what we talked with Austin Eckler about, joking, not joking. You know you guys can kneel on the ball the entire game. It's 0-0, and you both get into the playoffs. There was no conversation about that. If there had been a conversation about it, maybe Brandon Staley is operating in a different way. But this was a fair contest. And I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people. I hear a lot of people, there's Jeff Howe there saying he cost the Chargers their season. There's Bucky Brooks saying it's coaching malpractice that you didn't play for a tie. I mean, think about that. You think it's malpractice that somebody didn't want to tie a game, that they were trying to prevent what they thought might be a victory, and that's what they were. They're going for a victory. After the fact, he says, we discussed a tie, but you're on the field. You don't know what your opponent is trying to do. So you're trying to play the game the right way. I never wanted this to be a tie. I was so disappointed that it got to this point. I was.
The fun part was the kneel down. That was the fun part during the week was the kneel down. But once it got to, wait a minute, could we have the best of both worlds? Could they have actually played the game the right way, protected the integrity of the game, and ended up with a tie? I mean, that's why Justin Herbert said I never wanted a tie so bad. It would have been awesome.
I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm talking about the stuff that we have on the screen. The comment from Jeff Howe and the comment from Bucky Brooks, that's not playing the game the right way. That's like, hey, well, let it happen because it's good for you and it's good for me. By the way, I'm telling you.
Because there's 4 seconds left on the play clock. the way the Raiders were approaching it, it's at that point, even though you can't read Rich Bisaccia's mind, if you're the Chargers, it's no different than letting somebody score. You know, there are situations at the end of the game where you let somebody score. That's against your instincts.
Right.
But in order to preserve time, you let them score. So in that instance, I understand the criticism.
Win.
Right.
Not so you can
but
tie.
in this case, you do play to tie the game if a tie means you're getting into the playoffs along with the other team. So I do understand on the surface the criticism of Brandon Staley because the tie seemed to alter the outcome, the timeout seemed to alter the outcome of the game. What's the bigger problem is giving up a 10-yard run after the timeout. But Michael, in my mind, it should have never come down to this. Where Brandon Staley blew it was not in overtime. Brandon Staley blew it at the end of regulation. There was a theme that you and I kept coming back to at the end of the season, seemingly in back-to-back weeks, I believe, courtesy of John Harbaugh's Baltimore Ravens. And that's going for 2 at the end of the game instead of playing for overtime. Michael, at the end of a 19-play drive on which you converted, I believe, 3 fourth-down attempts, if my memory serves. Go for 2 to win the game right there. That's what, if Brandon Staley, Mr. going for it on 4th down from inside his own 20-yard line, I was shocked that Brandon Staley did not try to end it at the end of regulation rather than go into overtime. You got an exhausted team on both sides. The Raiders defense is on its heels. You've come back from 15 points down. And you just went on a 19-play drive? That is John Harbaugh would have gone for 2. Guarantee you John Harbaugh would have gone for 2 at the end of regulation. And we're not having this conversation.
He probably would have. He probably would have gone for 2.
That's what I would have done. I was shocked Staley did.
That's probably, you know, it's probably, you come face to face with your philosophy. Now you really have to declare who you are. And so he seems to be this guy, you know, when he went for it on 4th and 1 from his own 18, down 3. Okay, this process in the third quarter. Okay, midway through the third quarter, it's 17-14. They're trailing. He's at his own 18-yard line, and he goes for it on 4th and 1. Okay, so if you're going to be that guy, which is crazy. I mean, by the way, that's crazy. That's crazy. That is crazy. So all these people talking about, oh, he cost them their season. He may have cost them their season like 8-9 times during the game, but we just always go back to the last thing we saw and say, hey, if not for that, the Chargers would have won. Well, the Chargers might have won if they had, I don't know, punted on 4th and 1 from their own 18 in the third quarter. So there are many situations.
3 points. Yeah.
Yeah, in that game. And quiet as it's kept, Mike, we're all praising the Raiders today. I think Rich Bisaccia made a mistake. When you're chasing points, I say, just for me, I didn't get to some analytics. It's just
when it's 26-14.
26-14.
26-14. Yeah, going for 2.
Kick the extra point. Why are you going for 2? I want to make it 28-14. Why? It's 26.
As if they can't go for 2.
Get an extra point.
Like, no, that's such an old school way of doing it, because making it a 14-point game is the days when everybody just kicked extra points and needed 2 touchdowns and 2 extra points. And when an extra point was automatic. Nowadays, people going for 2, 14 points don't mean what it used to mean. But honestly, the Raiders, though, for me, Michael, they're the story. I know, listen, it's like what Brandon Staley could have done. Could it have been a tie? Should we have been rooting for a tie? And honestly, I would have liked to have seen the reaction had it ended in a tie and both teams met at midfield, and instead of the usual dejection after a tie, they're feeling good about themselves and congratulating each other on a job well done. That would have been a sight to see. But honestly, Michael, all I got to say, and I'll close with this on this subject. 4 weeks ago, we talked about the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'm pretty sure I didn't say anything nice about them. This was after they met at the Logo in Kansas City and proceeded to get curb stomped. 48-9, I think the score was. And since then, 4 games left against 4 teams fighting for the playoffs themselves. They beat the Browns by 2, the Broncos by 4, the Colts by 3, and the Chargers, obviously on a field goal last night. They've won 4 overtime games this year, okay? It was the 6th time this season that they have won on a field goal, on the last play, I beg your pardon. 6 times they won on the last play, 5 on a field goal. An interim coach is taking the Las Vegas Raiders into the playoffs. Everybody's got a story to tell. There's 8 million stories in the NFL postseason. All 14 of those teams have overcome something at one point or another. But the bottom line is the Raiders, for my money, and I know you and I are both storytellers by nature, by trade, by calling, best story of the postseason, given everything they had to traverse and everything that they had to overcome in order to get to this point. Because 4 weeks ago, when Kansas City was embarrassing them, couldn't have told me this was going to be the end of their story and the end of their regular season.
Mike, they've been a story. You said the regular season. They've been a story since the offseason. Was it July when we saw quarterback of the show, Derek Carr, out at Lake Tahoe? And he said, hey, I just know I wasn't the MF that Tom Brady was talking about. That's one.
Yeah.
Two, they have the first openly gay player in the NFL, star player, really good player, in Carl Nassib. He comes out. Derek Carr says, hey, he's my brother. I'm happy for him. So you have these stories. You have, that's just for the offseason. That's in the offseason. Then during the season, obviously, John Gruden, his situation. They cut a draft pick. I'm not talking about Ruggs. They cut a draft pick. People said, hey, you probably shouldn't draft this guy from Ohio State.
Arnett. Yeah.
Damon Arnett, they cut him. So then we get into Ruggs. And that situation, I mean, they've had so many things happen to them off the field. Then on the field, they've been very interesting because they got off to a strong start, and then they seemed to stumble a bit. They had their off-the-field drama. And here they are, as you pointed out, at 6-7, and nobody's really thinking about the Raiders as a real playoff team. They're on that list, others in contention, in the hunt, and you just kind of dismiss them. The Raiders aren't about it. But they were, and they are. I think the Rich Bisaccia should be a strong coach of the year contender. Very strong. Right up there with my guy, Mike Vrabel. He's in the conversation for me.
Yeah. All right, listen, he's also made a case to keep the job beyond an interim status, which we'll talk about that later on. Now I'm conflicted because I love this story. And because it didn't end in a tie, they get my Bengals on Saturday instead of the Chiefs on Sunday. So now I want to root for the Raiders, but not at the expense of my Bengals.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.